My name is Ilana. I host a podcast and have a website
Okay.
about
What?
social justice.
Very nice. When did you start? When did you start this podcast?
Okay, so that's kind of a hard question. I
Oh, crud.
started kind of during the pandemic time because I had nothing else to do. Um, it was kind of it was something that I liked doing, and I was self-taught. So I was like looking online, asking my parents like how I could do something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And then I kind of just did it on my own. Um, but my first episode was like in 2020, and I interviewed my mom.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think who did I interview? I started mine just before, a few months before COVID. So like late 2019, early 2020. And I think maybe did I interview somebody from my family, or I interviewed a coworker or something, but yeah. But okay. So it was COVID. You were looking for something to do, but you could have played video games. You could have read books.
I did all of it. It was kind of, I played video games, I read books, and I had a podcast.
Video.
The podcast
All the kids.
was,
How come you didn't make TikToks?
because I don't know. I mean, first of all, my parents wouldn't let me use social media.
Okay.
But
That's a good reason.
also, it just wasn't something that I was that interested in.
Yeah.
Um,
I'm curious, did you pick podcasts because you're like, I think I want to try to do a podcast? Did you listen to other podcasts?
I was inspired by many other podcasts.
Okay.
Not necessarily actually inspired with the idea, but just the idea of having a piece of audio that you make and then publishing it to the world. I thought that was pretty cool.
Did you have a favorite one at the time you remember, or a favorite one now? One you like to listen to?
Ooh, that's really hard. Okay, it sounds kind of boring, but Radiolab.
Oh yeah, Radiolab's great.
Mm-hmm.
Did you go back? Did you go back and listen to? Did you like it so much you went to listen to old episodes of Radiolab?
Yeah.
Or you're just me too. Yeah. It's very good. Okay, why did you pick this subject? So would you tell me again, what is the name of your podcast? And the subject is social justice. Why that subject?
So the name is the Kids for Justice Power Pod.
Okay.
I think I did it because I wanted to empower kids my age to like get involved and be informed about activism and just like social causes that they cared about, whether that be climate change or like anti-racism or like gun violence or whatever. But I think it's important for kids to know about these things and to have the resources if they wanted to take action.
Do you feel like in your regular, so the regular school stuff you do, that you do not get that kind of information? Like they're not really telling you as a student at your age level, if you're worried about this in the world, this is how you go fix it? You feel like they don't give you that information?
So I just moved here from California.
Okay.
And it was, at my old school, there was more resources for kids to like learn about these things. Mm-hmm. But it wasn't as much. They don't really have a curriculum for that. So what I was trying to do is kind of like supplement that.
So there was some, but it didn't feel like it was.
There was some, but it was very vague.
What in the episodes you've done, the people you've been able to talk to so far, like you started with your mom. So does that mean your mom does some kind of activism actively?
Yes.
Okay.
Episode is called Social Movements with Dr. Deborah Guggenheimer.
Mm-hmm.
So she's like a professor. She was a professor. And taught people about sociology and social movements. So I thought that was interesting. So I interviewed her.
Did you feel like, was your focus of your episode, did you want to learn more from your guest, or was in your head when you're doing it, do you think at the end of this, what am I going to tell kids they can do if they're excited about this cause, this kind of activism?
I mean, kind of what I've been trying to do is like have it so like they'll share what they're doing,
Mhm.
and I kind of ask them like how kids can get involved, and they share their insights about it. Um, but I think it was also kind of like just like because I have a newsletter, so I kind of shared that with people, like the summaries of the episodes, and like if they like, any like links or articles or things like that they needed,
So
or
that's
if
your
they
chance
were,
to,
yeah,
to provide like show notes stuff,
yeah.
like stuff you heard in the thing.
Hmm.
What is the part of podcasting so far that's the hardest for you? Is it finding the guests? Is it talking to them? Is it coming
I
up with
think it's
questions?
finding the guests and scheduling because scheduling is so tedious.
Yeah. Oh,
So
like it's not
tedious.
fun to do.
Even it's not fun to do. Even if you have like an app for it, like I have like Google Calendar and then Calendly, but like it's still tedious because you have to figure out like when they're available, and then like sometimes gets like canceled or whatever. Um, and just finding the guests for the podcast episodes is kind of also very tedious.
How have you found the ones so far in the past couple of years?
Um, they were either people that I already knew, or my mom or parents just like were like, "Oh, I know this person. Maybe they could talk to you about something."
Oh, yeah. So they
Yeah,
recommended things.
yeah.
You haven't had a lot of luck with like, I'm gonna go on the internet right now and I'm gonna go through and try to find somebody and then randomly ask some random person I don't know, will you
Oh, I
come be on
did
my
do that
podcast?
actually
You did? How'd it
recently.
go?
I just did that recently. It actually went really well. Um, the new episode's coming out soon. I'm still editing it, but
Okay.
it's with Ryan Sorrell of the Kansas City Defender.
Mhm.
And I didn't know who this person was, so I just like sent them an email. I was like, "Hey, do you want to do a podcast interview?" And they were like, "Yeah, sure." So,
Oh, is it what does the Kansas City Defender do?
um, they it's kind of similar to what I'm doing, but it's like it's a newspaper, and their goal is to defend the black community
Mhm.
from like because a lot of media organizations are led by white people
Mhm.
and cover protests and actions in a way that isn't always the most factual, and their goal was to have a black owned media organization that covers it by black people, so there's like more of a relation and more of like it's like they actually know what's going on because they were in the protest, like a
Yeah.
first-hand account. And to help people and get resources if they're in danger.
Did they have, when you asked at the end, you're like, what can kids do? Did they have like ready, like, these are things you can do, or do they have to really think about it?
They have to think
Um,
about it a little
okay.
bit. But I try to ask in every episode, how do you think that kids could get involved in what you're doing? Or just in general, how do you think kids can get involved in activism? And I've gotten some pretty good answers.
Okay, so the hardest thing, scheduling, finding guests. Is there a part of the podcasting you thought would be hard or that you were worried about doing for the first time that turned out not to be as hard as you thought
I
it would
think it
be?
was editing.
Okay, editing. You were like, can I edit? How much
I
editing do you do?
I
I'm
do
curious.
all of it. I do literally
Okay.
all of it. Like take the file and then just put it into something, and then I chop it up and add music and stuff.
Yeah. Do you, so are you kind of, so there's some podcasts on one side of the spectrum. There's some podcasts like mine, which are really just the conversation, mostly from beginning to end. And this like the power goes out or something. It's just a conversation. Whereas other podcasts, it sounds like you do this. It's more heavily edited, almost like a news story on NPR where they interview a lot
Yeah.
of people and then they cut it down heavily into just the bits they want.
Yeah. It's kind of
Okay.
like that. I mean, I don't have usually really long interviews like this one, but like
Okay.
they're usually shorter and more digestible, just so it's like because my target audience is kids, so I don't want it to be like a 60-hour long episode because that would be a lot.
Who right now? I know the hard thing is to get guests, and so it sounds like there's a lot recommended, and sometimes you go looking, and this is awesome that you had somebody you like just went out and I don't know you, will you be on? And they said yes. Who would be your ultimate get? Like there's a guest or the kind of person you're like, oh, I really hope I get this person on the podcast someday.
Someday.
Yeah.
I would probably interview Angela Davis.
That would be a good one.
Or like, that's a really hard question. Yeah.
Is it because there's too many people, or it's just hard to...
it's hard to choose.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people. I don't know.
Well, Angela Davis is a good one.
Yeah.
When you do your podcast, do you have set questions and you ask those?
Yeah.
Or do you go, okay, you don't usually like go off on tangents.
So
like,
so I have a list, and then I have follow-up questions, and then I sometimes just like, am like, oh, I want to hear more about this or this or this.
Do you ever get people who go, are you ever worried because you said, hey, I think about the attention span of the kids that I want to listen to this podcast, and that they're not going to sit for a long thing? Do some of the guests ever really go really long, and then you're like, please let them wrap it up because I want to get on to my next question?
Mm-hmm.
What do you do in those situations where they're really going long? Do you just edit it later?
What I do is I let it run, because you never know if there's going to be actually something really interesting that they say. So then I go back and post, and then I'm like, oh, this tangent was actually kind of interesting. So I take like a clip of it, and I just like shove it back in.
Yeah. Do you like the probably not the getting the guest? Do you like coming up with questions, researching, interviewing the guest, or editing? What part of it do you like the best right now? Like, what's the most fun part?
Editing.
And that's the part you were like, I don't know if I can do it.
It takes a really long time, but when you've done it, it's so satisfying.
What is the feeling? Why do you think it's so satisfying?
Because it just kind of feels like whole. Like, I did that.
Yeah. Like when you're done, you're like, oh, that's a real podcast, and I made it. Were there other subjects besides activism where when you were thinking, what kind of podcast do I want to start? Like there's some other hobby you're into, or some other thing.
So what actually happened is I started with the website kidsforjustice.org. And then I was like, oh, I should make a podcast out of this website. So I kind of took the idea from the website. If I were to make a different podcast, it would probably be about, like, Minecraft.
Oh, nice.
I don't know. Either, like, video games or just, like, society, arts and culture kind of stuff. I mean, that's kind of what I'm already doing.
But almost like a wider net. You can talk about more stuff. Yeah. What particular causes? There might be a lot of stuff. Is there one in particular you're really focused on right now, and that you're most excited about, or you're most into learning about or working on?
I don't know.
There's a lot.
Yeah.
What do you, if it's not, I don't think it's too personal, but if it's personal, you can tell me. I'm not answering it. What kind of activism, what do you do? So either learning from your guests about what you could do, or in the past, your website and everything. You, as a kid, what do you do these days to support the causes?
I mean, a lot of times I just go to protests with my family. But besides protesting, I guess, like, just making the podcast is a way of activism.
Yeah.
And just informing people. But yeah, protests and actions have been something that I've been doing a lot of.
When you go to a protest or an action, what does it feel like? Like, what do you feel like when you're there?
I don't know, kind of like a community that we all share the same relative interest.
Yeah. Do you feel do you ever get worried or scared, or do you usually?
Yeah.
Oh, no, go ahead.
Sometimes I get a little scared. But usually it's fine.
Yeah.
But I usually go to a lot of protests with, like, kids there, so. So
they tend to be they're protests that are not planned to, like, it's not planned. We're not planning for violence or anything crazy happening.
Like peaceful protests.
Okay. What kind of stuff, if it ever gets worried, is it just because the crowd's too big? Like, what's happened in the past?
Probably just because the crowd's too big.
Okay. you ever feel like crushed? Like, it happens at
Yeah.
concerts, or people ever get kind of mushed up?
Yeah.
Yeah. What was the last protest you went to? Do you remember?
No.
Is it because it was so long ago, or you're like, I go to so many things?
I just go to so many, I forget.
What do you think? So kids, maybe if they're worried about something and they go looking for information, maybe it's hard for them to find the information they're looking for, and you're helping to solve that. What things do you hope, if a kid listens to your podcast, what do you hope that kid does?
I hope that they go out and, like, once they have some information, they go out and do something. So that, whether that be organizing something at their school or with their, like, neighborhood community, having, like, a fundraiser for something, or just being informed and just knowing about it or doing more research. Because if it's interesting to them, then I think it's a good idea to go out and, like, try to do something.
When you started your podcast, did you, like, set it up, like, did you have a dream for, like, I'm going to post every week, or I'm going to post every month, and then did it happen or not happen? How has the calendar been like the past few years?
Okay, funny story. So I'm looking at all my, like, I have a list of all the ones so I say I'm a podcaster. I have 6 episodes, which is a lot. But so I started kind of consistent. So I had an episode on December of 2022.
Okay.
No, that's not December. That's March. March of 2022.
Mm-hmm.
And then September of 2022. And then January of 2023. And then March of 2023. And then April of 2023. And September of 2024. January. And then September of 2024. It started a little more consistent, and then I had a really big break from April to September. It was a break of, like, a year and a half.
Yeah.
Mainly because I didn't have anyone to interview, and so a lot of times I actually interview some people, and then I have all the audio, and then it gets lost somewhere in, like, a really deep file or, like, the cloud, or I accidentally delete it or something. But I don't know where some of the recordings are, which kind of sucks, but that's okay. But my most recent episode was in September. So I'm trying to keep it consistent, so, like, once a month or once every 2 months.
Okay.
Mainly because it just does take a really long time to schedule.
Do you feel like you're not legit if you don't have enough episodes, or you're not legit if you don't publish on a regular enough schedule? I mean, 6 podcasts is 6 more than most people who want a podcast.
Yeah, I mean, that's true. That's true. No, I guess it is. It's a pretty legitimate podcast.
Yeah.
But I just want to try to make more episodes. That's been kind of my goals this year. Yeah.
How long does it take you? So in a typical time, if you get it scheduled and you do the interview and then editing it.
Scheduling, interview, editing, that takes a month.
Okay, one month.
Wait, no. It takes like 2 weeks because it depends. For scheduling, sometimes it takes a couple days. But for editing and, like, having the interview, that takes, like, a week.
Okay. Because you can't just sit down and you can't usually just sit down. I can edit a whole podcast episode in 1 hour. So if I come home from school,
this is the thing. I have to come home from school, and then I have, like, to do homework if I have it, and then I have to, like, I come home from school at, like, 3:30, so I have to And then like sometimes I have like extracurricular stuff after school, so I don't have a lot of time to edit. I have like an hour each day to edit, and I also want to do some stuff like I also want to relax and
Right.
not edit. And then I can't it on the weekends. So it's kind of complicated. Um
Last question. Okay, I just want you to dream. I want you to dream for your podcast. 5 years from now, if you're still podcasting Kids for Justice Power Pod, what do you think? This is what I want for it. This is how often I want to do it. This is how big I want it to be. This is who I want to listen to it. What do you think? Okay. Yeah. Okay. No Twitter. Okay. Do you wear merch? Have you made stickers? Do you wear merch? Yeah. Okay, kids, the number 4 justice.org. And that's how your podcast is on there too. Okay. Okay. Awesome. Well, so yeah, before your right, right. Smash the subscribe button. Oh, I hate that so much. That's right. Ugh, gross. You'll never, are you going to do that? What if it would get your audience? Okay. Yep. Okay. I'm going to hold you to that. Please don't do that. I hate that just as much as you do.